Episode 6 just did the one thing Fallout has been refusing to do for 2 full seasons. It took the biggest question in the entire franchise, the question that sits underneath every vault, every dead city, every glowing crater, and it finally pointed at someone and said, "This is who set it all in motion, not Raiders, not the Brotherhood, not Caesar's Legion, not even Vault-Tec in the way you thought." Because in episode 6, the show says the name out loud, the Enclave. And once you realize what that means, you understand something terrifying. This wasn't chaos. This wasn't history going wrong. This was a plan, a system, a controlled demolition of humanity. And we are only now meeting the people who wrote the blueprint. So let's break this down, step by step, using what episode 6 reveals, what Fallout's canon already tells us, and why this episode quietly confirms that the Enclave wasn't just involved. They were the engine behind the entire apocalypse machine. Episode 6 is titled The Other Player, and that title matters because it's picking up the exact nerve episode 5 exposed. The implication that Vault-Tec might not have been alone, but episode 6 takes that suspicion and turns it into a looming confirmation, because the episode drops 3 massive pieces of information. A super mutant rescues the ghoul after his hours-long impalement. That super mutant tells him a war is coming, and ghouls and mutants need to unite, and most importantly, he identifies the enemy, the people who set all this in motion, the Enclave. That line alone is the show lighting a match in a gas-filled room, because Fallout fans know the Enclave isn't just another faction. The Enclave is the shadow government, the leftover real America, the part of the old world that didn't die in the fire, because they already had an exit plan. And episode 6 isn't teasing them anymore. It's telling you they've been here. And the moment you accept that, everything about Season 1 and Season 2 starts clicking into place. In Fallout lore, the Enclave is what happens when the apocalypse ends. But the people who caused it keep living like it never happened. They're not survivors, they're the inheritors. They're the people who still believe the world belongs to them, even after it's ash. And the reason episode 6's reveal is so big is because it reframes the Fallout universe. Because if the Enclave is the one who set it all in motion, then that means Vault-Tec isn't the final villain. Vault-Tec is a tool, a corporate machine that serves something higher. And episode 6 does something brutal. It shows you how that tool works. Not through nukes, not through bombs, but through math. Through acceptable loss, through quiet decisions made in sterile rooms by smiling people. And the episode's most disturbing pre-war reveal proves it. Episode 6 gives us one of the coldest corporate moments in the entire series. Vault-Tec learns that the water chips have a 30% failure rate, and that sounds like a technical problem, until the episode adds the second part. Vault-Tec will know which ones fail before they're installed, meaning they don't accidentally doom vaults. They get to choose. They can deliberately send out faulty chips and guarantee the death of specific vault populations. That is not a mistake. That is not incompetence. That is design. Episode 6 basically tells you Vault-Tec had a kill switch baked into the system and used it like a god deciding who gets to drink. And if you're wondering why this matters to the Enclave, here's the real point. A faction like the Enclave doesn't need to personally kill millions. They just need the infrastructure that guarantees people die without ever seeing the hand that pushed them. Vault-Tec created vaults, but episode 6 shows you vaults were never protection. They were selection, and selection is what the Enclave does best. Episode 5 already sets up the feeling that even Robert House, the man who models Doomsday like an equation, believes there's another player at the table. Episode 6 doesn't show the Enclave walking into House's boardroom, but it shows something arguably more damning. It shows the system Vault-Tec is operating was never about saving everyone. It's about deciding who belongs in the future, and that ideology screams Enclave, because that's what they've always been. Purity, control, a future where the right people inherit the Earth. So when the super mutant says they're the ones who set it all in motion, it doesn't mean they dropped one bomb. It means they built the logic behind the bombs, the war, the vaults, the experiments, the abominations, the reshaping of human evolution, everything. And that brings us to the ghoul, because episode 6 turns him from a wandering survivor into a living weapon that the world has been waiting to activate. Episode 6 makes you feel something at the start of its ghoul storyline. Finality. He's impaled for hours. It feels like the show is pushing him toward feral collapse. But then something happens. A hooded figure pulls him down. And when the hood drops, it's a super mutant. Not a random one. Not a background threat. A speaking character with purpose. He drags the ghoul back, stabilizes him, and delivers a line that changes everything. There's a war coming, and we need you healthy. That tells you something immediately. The wasteland isn't drifting anymore. It's organizing, and the ghoul isn't just surviving. He's being recruited, because the ghoul has something no one else has. He lived before the bombs. He remembers the world as it was. He remembers Vault-Tec. He remembers the lies. He remembers the way the system moved. And if the enemy really is the Enclave, then the ghoul might be one of the only people alive who can recognize the pattern before it's too late. Episode 6's super mutant doesn't just rescue the ghoul and vanish. He frames the entire identity of ghouls and mutants like this. They call us abominations, but they created our kind. That line is a loaded gun, because in Fallout lore, super mutants are tied to human experimentation and the forced evolutionary virus. And episode 5 already teased that the FEV threads are active in this story, and with Norm investigating Vault-Tec secrets tied to FEV and shadowy investors. Episode 6 doesn't need to dump a lab scene in your lap. It doesn't need a villain monologue. It just needs one idea. The monsters didn't happen by accident. They were produced. And if the Enclave is the enemy, then the Enclave doesn't just want to survive the wasteland. They want to own the future of the species. And now ghouls and mutants are realizing they were never random byproducts. They were collateral in someone else's project. Here's why episode 6 is so important. Vault-Tec is the villain people expected. Corporation gets greedy. Experiments go too far. World collapses. Simple. But the Enclave, though, that's the villain you can't fix with a single gunfight, because Vault-Tec dies with the old world. The Enclave survives it. They don't represent greed. They represent continuity of power. A world where even the apocalypse can't dethrone the people at the top. So when episode 6 says they set it all in motion, it's telling you that the apocalypse wasn't the end of the system. It was the system's next phase. And suddenly every mystery in the show becomes one question. Who is steering this? And the answer starts to look very clear. The people who benefit from chaos are the people who designed it. While the ghoul storyline is revealing the big villain, episode 6's present timeline is doing something else. It's sharpening the emotional knife, because Lucy's arc is now fully trapped inside Hank's orbit. Episode 6 pushes the story toward Lucy confronting Hank, and forces Lucy to decide what right even means in a world built on lies. And the reason this matters is because Lucy is the symbol of the Vault lie. She is the believer, the moral compass, but now she's seeing what's behind the curtain. And Hank isn't just a dad anymore. He's a man who represents the Vault system. And the Vault system is now revealed as a controlled filter that decides who lives. If the Enclave truly sits above that, then Hank isn't the final boss. He's a middle manager in the end of the world, and Lucy realizing that is where the story becomes dangerous. Because the moment Lucy stops believing in the Vault's purpose, she becomes unpredictable. And unpredictable people are the only thing systems like the Enclave can't control. Here's the sick genius of the Enclave, and why episode 6's reveal feels so late, and yet so perfect. The Enclave doesn't show up early. They let the world destroy itself. They let factions fight over scraps. They let vaults collapse. They let people blame Vault-Tec, because if the world is too busy surviving, no one looks for the puppeteer. And this is why the super mutant statement hits like a brick. They took us to the point of extinction and forgot we ever existed. That's what the Enclave does. They treat populations like test results, like numbers, like acceptable losses. Just like the water chip failure rate reveal proves Vault-Tec is already doing. Episode 6 is showing you an ideology that runs through all of it. Some people are the future. Most people are expendable. And if the Enclave truly orchestrated the system, then the apocalypse was never a tragedy to them. It was a reset. reset button. Episode 6 doesn't end with a tidy conclusion. Multiple reviews and recaps agree. This episode feels like a bridge, setting up the final collisions. And that's exactly what it's doing narratively. It's positioning pieces, because now we have Lucy confronting Hank and questioning everything, the ghoul being recruited for a coming war, Vault-Tec proven to have deliberate kill choices with the water chips, the Enclave named as the hidden enemy behind the motion of all this. That is not random. That is Fallout shifting from mystery into confrontation. And the important part is, the war isn't going to be good versus evil. It's going to be survival versus control. Because the Enclave's greatest weapon isn't soldiers, it's structure. It's the ability to make everyone else fight each other while they stay untouched. And now the Wasteland is starting to realize who the true enemy is. Now we get to the central argument of this entire video. Episode 6 doesn't just reveal the Enclave exists. It implies Vault-Tec was never the top of the pyramid. And we have to phrase this carefully. The show has not shown a scene of Enclave leaders ordering Vault-Tec around. That has not happened on screen in Episode 6. But Episode 6 does provide narrative evidence that supports this structure. Vault-Tec is making selection choices, water chip failures, like they're part of a larger design, and the super mutant claims the Enclave is responsible for the entire motion of this world's destruction. So the most reasonable conclusion is, Vault-Tec built the vaults, but the Enclave built the future those vaults were meant to serve. Vault-Tec is the visible hand, the Enclave is the invisible brain, and if that's true, then the show is about to do something terrifying in the finale. It's going to reveal that the apocalypse wasn't the collapse of order. It was the enforcement of a new order. If the Enclave is the enemy, then the ghoul becomes more than a survivor. He becomes a witness, because nobody else has the same perspective. Lucy knows the vault lie, but she's still learning it. Maximus knows survival, but not pre-war truth. Hank knows the system, but only the piece he's allowed to manage. The ghoul lived in the world when all these people were smiling and making deals. He remembers the polite version of evil, and that matters, because systems like the Enclave don't show up with spikes and skulls. They show up with paperwork, with clean uniforms, with calm voices, with the kind of language that makes genocide sound like logistics, just like 30% failure rate. Good news, we'll know which ones fail. The ghoul understands that kind of evil. He's seen it wear a suit. So if a war is coming, the ghoul isn't being saved because he's strong. He's being saved because he's dangerous to the truth. This is the moment where the whole episode comes together. Episode 6 is not just a plot episode, it's a statement. It says, the wasteland is not the aftermath. The wasteland is the experiment continuing. Vault-Tec's vaults were experiments. Water chip failure is controlled death. And the Enclave, if they set this all in motion, means the experiment was always meant to extend beyond the vault, into the species, into evolution, into who qualifies as human. That's why the super mutant speech hits so hard. It's not, we need revenge, it's, we need unity, because if ghouls and mutants don't unite, they get erased from the future, again. Now, here's what makes the Enclave reveal so terrifying. Raiders can be killed, Legion can be defeated, Brotherhood can be outmaneuvered, but the Enclave is an idea that the world belongs to a select few, and everyone else is either labor or waste. And episode 6 is pushing that idea into the center of the show, because now the wasteland isn't just fighting to survive, it's fighting to define what the future even is. And the finale setup becomes clear. If Lucy wants truth, she'll have to burn the comforting lie she grew up with. If the ghoul wants his humanity, he'll have to survive being turned into a weapon. And if the wasteland wants freedom, it's going to have to fight something worse than violence. It's going to have to fight control. Episode 6 doesn't just reveal a faction, it reveals the shape of the story, because now you understand Vault-Tec wasn't the final villain. Vault-Tec was the door, and the Enclave is what was standing behind it the whole time. The people who didn't just survive the end of the world, but engineered a world where they'd be the only ones left with power. And the craziest part, they didn't disappear. They didn't die, they just waited. While everyone else fought over the ruins, they kept building the future. So when the episode says, the people who set this all in motion, the Enclave, That isn't a tease, that's a warning. Because if the Enclave really is back, then the Fallout story you thought you were watching was only the prologue. And the war that's coming, it's not for territory, it's not for revenge, it's for the right to exist in whatever world comes next. And now the only question is, when the Enclave finally steps out of the shadows, who's still alive to stop them? If you want the episode 7 breakdown the second it drops, with the Enclave connections, the Vault kill switch theory, and what this war actually looks like in Fallout canon, subscribe right now, because episode 6 didn't just reveal the enemy, it revealed the people who wrote the apocalypse like a business plan. And we're about to watch the wasteland find out what happens when the real owners of the world come back to collect.